Have you ever had a conversation with a little kid? It's easy to get them to talk. In fact, the hard part is usually getting them to shut up. With just a little encouragement, you can easily get a little kid to tell you all about how he's feeling. If he's hungry, whether he's hot or cold, and just about anything else that's going on in his life. Believe it or not, but your car has the ability to tell you all the same information. Lucky for you, though, it isn't quite as noisy about it. Rather, when your car has something important to tell you, it uses this, your dashboard instrument panel. It's that thing with all the lights and gizmos on it, just above your steering wheel. Yep, those lights and gizmos actually have a purpose, and it's slightly more important purpose than just being pretty to look at. Each one of those warning lights and gauges is there to inform you when the vehicle has a problem or concern. Our example here will give you a good idea of what the most common warning lights and gauges mean. But before you drive, you'll want to be sure to take a moment to read your vehicle's owner manual, so you can find out exactly where all those warning lights and gauges are on your car and how they all work. The first gauge we're going to take a look at is probably the biggest, most obvious part of the entire dashboard instrument panel, your speedometer. It's pretty hard to miss, and for good reason. This gauge is here to tell you exactly how fast you're traveling at any given time. It's pretty self-explanatory. The needle is pointing at 50. Then your vehicle is traveling at 50 miles per hour. You want to keep checking your speedometer from time to time as you drive. If you exceed the speed limit, your speedometer will be the first warning you get, and the speeding ticket from the police will be the second. The little clicking numbers sitting below your speedometer, though, might be a little more confusing. That big one is called the odometer. It tells you how many miles your car has been driving since it was first built. It's a good idea to check your odometer once in a while. That way, you can tell how many miles it's been since your last oil change. The smaller string of numbers below the odometer, though, that's called your trip odometer. See the button next to it? If you push that button, the trip odometer will reset itself to 0. You can use this trip odometer to figure out how many miles it is from one destination to another, or to figure out how many miles you can drive on a single tank of gas, so you know what kind of gas mileage your vehicle is currently getting. Clever, huh? Speaking of gas, this gauge here is your gas gauge. It tells you approximately how much gas is remaining in your tank. F stands for full, and E stands for empty. It's always a good idea to try and keep that gauge closer to full, since an empty gas tank means you won't be driving anywhere. Ideally, you should go to a gas station and fill up once your gas gauge falls below a third of a tank. That way, you won't have to worry about running out suddenly. Of course, since gas is so important to your vehicle, you've actually got a secondary warning when it comes to your gas, the low fuel warning light. This light might look like a little red light by the gas gauge, or the vehicle might have a low fuel warning light that looks like this one. No matter which type of low fuel warning light your car is equipped with, they both mean the same thing. If that light comes on, your car is just about to run out of gas. You should immediately find a gas station to refuel. On most cars, this light comes on when your car has less than 2 gallons of gas left, though on some cars it can be even less. This little gauge is your temperature warning gauge. It's there to tell you when the coolant in your engine is too hot or too low. If that gauge gets into the red zone, then your engine is running too hot. You should pull over just as soon as you can. Don't try to keep driving, or you can risk permanently damaging your vehicle. You'll need to get the car looked at by a professional mechanic right away. This next gauge is the oil pressure warning gauge. It's there to tell you when your car is running low on oil. An engine without oil is like a body without blood. It's just not going to run. Keeping your car's engine at a proper oil pressure is extremely important. Of course, your vehicle might not have an oil pressure warning gauge. It might have one of these instead. Whether it's a gauge or a light, it still means the same thing. Check your oil. Lucky for you, checking your oil is something you can actually do yourself. To check the oil in your engine, first off, wait until the engine is cooled down. If you try to check your oil while the engine is still hot, you might burn yourself, and you won't get an accurate reading. Once the engine is cool, raise the hood and look for your dipstick. It probably looks like this. That dipstick is there to tell you exactly how much oil is left in your engine. Grab it, pull it out of the engine, and wipe it clean with a cloth. Once you do that, put it back in the engine. Make sure you put it back in all the way. Then remove it again. The level of oil residue on the dipstick will tell you how much oil is left in your engine. If it's extremely low, you might be able to put a quarter or two of oil in the car temporarily to allow you to drive a little further. But you'll definitely want to take the car to the mechanic right away. Don't just keep refilling your oil, or you'll just be burning through it, and you could cause serious damage to your engine. It's important to note that there's a big difference between your oil pressure warning light and your oil service indicator light. If your vehicle is older, it probably doesn't have an oil service indicator light. But if you're driving a newer vehicle, you might see this little light on your dashboard. It's there to remind you when you need to get your oil changed. The general rule of thumb is you should change the oil in your car and your oil filter every 3,000 miles. Don't try to push it and keep driving on old oil. As you drive, your oil will get dirty and thick and can eventually clog up your engine. Now this little doohickey here is called your alternator warning gauge. It's there to tell you when there's a problem with your car battery or with the alternator that recharges it. Your car's engine is equipped with an alternator, which is a little generator that recharges your car battery while you drive, so that you'll always have enough energy to start your car up. If either that battery or that alternator fails, then eventually you won't be able to start your car, no matter how much gas you've got in it. We should also mention your car might have one of these. An alternator warning light. Whether your car has a light or a gauge, they both mean trouble. If that light goes off, you'll need to get your car checked by a professional mechanic right away. Battery problems can be dangerous, so don't try to fix them yourself. Next, this light here is your brake system warning light. It actually does two things. It tells you when your parking brake is engaged, and it tells you when there's a problem with your brakes. The answer to the first problem is pretty easy. Just disengage your parking brake and the light should go off. If it doesn't though, or if it comes on when you're driving, then that means that there's a problem with your brakes. Not good. In that case, you should pull over immediately and call to have your vehicle towed to a mechanic. Don't try to keep driving with bad brakes. It could cause a serious accident. Right next to the brake system warning light, you might have a light that looks like this one. If your car has anti-lock brakes, it'll tell you when those brakes are failing. For you, the driver, they both mean the same thing. If one of these lights goes off, time to go to the mechanic. This next light is there to indicate a problem with your airbags, if your car is equipped with them. Airbags are kind of like giant balloons that will instantly inflate if your vehicle is ever in an accident, protecting you and your passengers from injury. If this warning light goes off, you'll need to get your airbag system checked out by a mechanic right away. Not just because the airbags might not inflate properly, but also because if there's a problem with the system, the airbags might go off suddenly while you're driving, even if you're not in an accident. This next light is probably the easiest light to understand on the whole dashboard. It's the door ajar light. It means that your door is ajar. Ajar means open. Make sense now? If that light goes off, just close the door. And finally, we come to the most important light on your entire dashboard. Yes, even more important than the door ajar light. This is your service engine soon light. This warning light only goes off when there's a serious problem with your car's engine. You might still be able to drive, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. If this light goes off, get your car to a mechanic immediately. It's important to note that when you first start your car, it's completely normal for some of these warning lights to turn on for a few seconds. Don't let it freak you out. They should all turn back off in a moment. If they don't, though, or if they turn on while you're driving, then you might have a more serious problem, and you should get the car checked out by a mechanic right away. See, with the proper use of your vehicle's dashboard instrument panel, your car can tell you how it feels, when it's hungry, whether it's hot or cold, and all sorts of other stuff you'll need to know as a responsible driver. Now, if it only knew how to tell you jokes.